Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Emsi training session on industry and occupation tables. This session is going to be the first of a short series of sessions over the coming months, which will just be a 30-minute or so quick overview to some of the functionality in Analyst. Very often our training sessions cover FE Analyst, but this series is going to cover some of the more detailed sections within Analyst and will be that nice little introduction. If you have any questions at any point, please put them in the chat. You should see that in your webinar control panel, and I'll try to get to those at the end and signpost you to other information if I can't answer those right now. So first of all, in terms of the session today, just to introduce myself, my name is John Gray. I'm Director of Further Education here at Emsi. Background is working with colleges, and my role at the moment is working with people in our FE market, so colleges, training providers, other organisations, particularly around how to use the Emsi data for things like curriculum planning. So before we get into the tool today and have a look at the occupations and industries table, next couple of slides are just by way of a quick reminder, a quick refresher about the structure of the data that we're going to be looking at. The data is just in the Analyst tool, so if you only have access to the FE Analyst platform, then you will have to come to us to ask for access to the tables today. But nonetheless, it will give you a good overview of what this series of reports can do. So a couple of bits of terminology. Most of you will be aware of this, having used Emsi data before, but just a quick reminder always helps. So when we're looking at the data today in industry and occupation tables, we're going to be talking about standard industrial classifications or SIC codes, and these work through that 4-tier or 4-code structure. So a 1-digit SIC code in this example is manufacturing, very broad, and then we can work our way through to 2-digit, 3-digit, and 4-digit, and get to a much more granular level of data. So in this example, down to manufacturer of bread, fresh goods and pastry goods and cakes. In terms of standard occupational classifications, this is when we're looking at occupation data, and SOC codes again works in that 4-tier or 4-digit series. 1-digit being professional occupation, so a very broad grouping. And then we can work our way through again to 2-digit, 3-digit, and 4-digit, right down to midwives. So we'll look at some examples of this today, but just a reminder of the terminology of SIC and SOC codes. Now, one of the terms that we're going to look at today as well, we're going to, if we get time, look at one of the reports called staffing pattern. And I think this diagram is quite a nice way to explain staffing pattern before we actually look at it in the tool itself. So what we're doing here is making the connection between industries and occupations, and very often I see this often in colleges, people will look at one or the other. They'll tend to focus on industries or occupations, and what we try to encourage is to make the connection between the two. So looking at this example here, if we look at industry, we can see that computer programming activities as an industry, if we follow the lines across, we can then see examples of the occupations which are employed within those industries. So the first one being programmer and software developer, probably no surprise there, but the second one is sales, accounts and business development professionals. So when we look at the data within the tool, we'll see how we can make that connection from industry to staff employed within an industry, and we'll hopefully see that today. Next up, just to mention the projections and forecasts, we'll see some of that within the data today. Remember that Emsi's data is projections, not forecasts. So projection is we extrapolate from the past trends and build out on those trends to give you a projection for the future, whereas forecasts is what other providers and some of the government providers will tend to do. So we're looking at that projection, not forecast. I've just had a message pop up on my screen that in some audio, some internet connection problems. So apologies if you experience any of that. If you just drop me something in the chat, if you miss anything, then I can cover that again. So last couple of slides, and then we're going to get into the tool. If you need any more information on anything you see today, please check out Knowledgebase. There's a link on there in the slides. We'll share the slides afterwards. Knowledgebase is a great way to find information out about data within the tool, so might be a reminder of terminology or where data comes from, so please check that out. And final slide is just my contact details and a colleague, Ben Owen's contact details. So Ben and I will typically be one of your account managers if you're working in the further education space. If you've got any questions or need more help on using industries of occupation table, then just please let us know. So we're now going to shoot over to Analyst, and we're going to look at industry and occupation table. So you should now be able to see my screen, which has got Analyst on there. And what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to actually just take a look at the occupation table. So when you log into Analyst, you'll probably look something like this. You've got your saved reports, bookmarks. Just to note for any of you who've not done this already yet, that you can now switch to 2021 data. So up in the top right hand corner, when you see your name, if you click on that and then scroll down, you'll be able to turn on the 2021 beta data, and that's got the new data release in there. There'll be more information coming out soon about that. So first of all, we're going to click into the occupation section, and we're going to look at the occupation table. So the way I like to describe the occupation table is if you think about all the data that we hold about occupations, and think about the table is the spreadsheet in which all that data is kept. So you've got all the information contained in that one report within the table. All these other reports are just really riffing off that report, and they're kind of short workflow versions to give you things like a quick market comparison or the lowest ranked occupations. So they're just shortened versions. The benefit of using the occupation and industry table is sometimes the shortened, the quick reports don't actually cover the detail that you need. So by using the table, you're going to be able to pull out the exact columns that you need, and then you can export it in a format that suits you. So to click into the occupation table, first of all, to notice as we get in here, now you can see that we've got our region selected. I've just got that on Southeast. We could change that if you wanted to. But at the top here, the first thing we need to change is to decide if we want to show all available occupations or to limit by occupation. Now for this example, I'm going to limit by occupation, and then that will give us a search bar. And for those of you used to using the tool, you know that if you just started to type the occupation in that you wanted in there, that would come up. The other option you can do is click browse, and that will give you a list of all the SOC codes. And you can also click group, and that will give you a list of the associated groups. Always have a look in browsing groups, because sometimes it can save you time by trying to find the exact thing that you want if we've already created a grouping of that. So for this example, what I'm going to do is just type professional occupations. Remember in our slides that we just looked at, this is a one-digit SOC, so looking at a very broad grouping of occupational classifications. So once we've picked the occupation and the region, we can then go on to select the data that we want to show. These again are just quick links to some of the data. So at the moment I've got jobs and growth selected. So I'm just going to run that for now and show you what happens. So as we click run, we'll open up the report. As always with the analyst reports, on the left hand side we have our filters, so we can add or change occupations, change the region, change the time frame, and we can change the class of worker if we wanted to exclude maybe proprietors, which is largely that self-employed data. So to work across the columns that we have and how this report is formatted, first of all we have the SOC code that we selected, then we have the description of the SOC, so professional occupations, and then we have jobs in 2020, jobs in 2028, and the percentage, the number change and the percentage change. So that was what the that quick filter, just by ticking that jobs and growth box, that's the data that we then presented back. Now from there, if we wanted, we could add or remove columns, and we could add in more data sets. But I'm just going to show you a different example first, and then we'll go ahead and do that. So Just before I move on from there, what I wanted to show you here is just how you can then expand this data. So professional occupations is a very broad grouping. You know, we don't expect everybody to remember the different then codes which break down within that actual occupation classification. So a nice feature here is if you go to this 1-digit filter and click all levels, then what you'll be able to do, you'll see now this little arrow appear, and what you can now do is click on the arrow, and then you can actually drill down into that data. So as you can see there, as I'm doing this on health, and if I just click on there, you can see there that we've now broke down that health strand into 2-digit, 3-digit, and then 4-digit. So using the that drill down is a really good way to get you away from a higher level grouping into a lower level grouping, and a nice way because you still see the other data that sits around it. So it's just a nice way to be able to present that. So I'm going to go back to start over, and we're going to get into a little bit more detail now about how to use the table. So the last example, I selected jobs and growth. This time we're going to select something different. I'm just going to put professional occupations in again, just so that we've got a bit of consistency there. We'll keep our region as Southeast. This time what I'm going to do though is select custom data selection. So you could tick any of these boxes and build out your report that way. Custom will just give us a different format for us to select our option. So what you'll notice that's different on this report now is that we've got this custom data selection series of boxes appear, and we can see on the right hand side here, we can see the data that we've got selected in our report already. So openings, annual openings. So we can then work through this data selection and choose the fields that we want to see. So let's say that we want to see jobs in current year. So just tick that, and jobs in the end year. We want to see, for example, percentage jobs change. Let's do the number of jobs change as well. And then let's do location quotient in the end year. Exposure index. I'm just going to deselect average annual openings. And I'll put automation index in there as well. So what you'll see now is that we've populated the reports. You can see that we've selected these different data points, and if you wanted to change the ordering of those, then all you need to do is drag and drop, and you can swap the ordering around in your report. And then if we click select and run, that will then run the same data table, but this time you'll see that we've got all those additional columns across our report. So again, we're looking at 2-digit sort, which is professional. We've got the jobs in the start year, which was 2020, jobs in the end year, which was 2028, the number and percentage change, the location quotient, and then we've got automation index and exposure index. Now, the reason why exposure index is not showing as NA is that we have to drill down to a 4-digit level to be able to see the exposure against each 4-digit SOC. So it doesn't aggregate up at that same level at professional. That's too broad in this case. So again, we've got a number of options from here. What we can do is if we wanted to drill into this again, we could change to all levels, or we could choose to go to 2-digit or 3-digit or 4-digit. Now, what I'm going to just do is show you how this works now if we selected 4-digit. So remember, when we selected this report, we selected professional occupations, which is shown you here in the top left-hand corner. If we click on 4-digit, what it will then do is bring back all the 4-digit occupations, but within professional. So we've gone right down to that long list of 4-digit SOC codes, but we're still within that professional grouping. The other way to do that would have been, as I showed you in the first example, to have selected all levels, and then we could drill down into that. So now we've got our long list, there's a number of things we can do. First of all, we could add or remove columns if we wanted to do that. So we could change the order of what we've got, or we could add other things in. So what I've just noticed is I'd rather have number of jobs first before jobs change, percentage change. So I'm just going to select that, and we'll keep with that for now. The other thing to note then, because when we're looking at a data table like this, there's lots of data in there, and you'll see that the headings at the top are in blue. And what that means is we can basically sort on those columns. So we could sort, for example, by the job change to see which jobs, which occupations in this professional grouping are going to grow the most in the southeast in our time period. So if I click on this filter now, on the header, it will then sort the occupations by the highest number of job change first. So here we can see that we've got nurses at the top with 3,266 change in job growth, and medical practitioners and programmers and software developers and so on. And we could do that on any of the columns, and that would filter by that particular and sort by that particular category. So just to explain a couple of the metrics that I've pulled into this before I show you the next functionality. Location quotient, if you're not aware, is the concentration of this particular occupation in the area. So we're looking at where a particular occupation is highly concentrated in the area that we've selected. So in this example, the southeast. So the location quotient, the average, the national average is always 1. So anything which is less than 1, which is nurses, there is a lower concentration of that in this area than the UK average. And anything over 1, so here we can see programmers with 1.37, that means that there's a higher concentration of that particular occupation in this area. So they tend to suggest areas of specialism. And when we looked at something like veterinarians with an LQ of 1.79, that suggests that's quite highly concentrated for that particular area. So that's location quotient. We've then got the automation index, which the automation index, lower automation index means less disruption to technological advancements or automation, and a higher rating. So if we get up nearer towards 100, that's a higher level of disruption, a higher level of automation risk. And how that works is basically we're not saying that the jobs are at risk. It's actually that the activities, the tasks that are performed within those jobs, that's the things which are at high risk of being automated. So if we just scroll down here and find one with a higher rating, chartered and certified accountants, that's got an automation risk of 31.2%, which means that 31% of the tasks typically associated with those jobs are at risk of being automated at some point in the future. And if we think about the role of an accountant and a bookkeeper and things like that, we know that the advancements in Excel and other software and programming will mean that lots of the tasks that would ordinarily be performed will be superseded by software that will maybe do some of that work. Not saying that the number of people required is going to be less. It's just saying that the skills that they need could potentially be different. And finally, the exposure index is the new measure we've introduced to look at the impact of COVID. And so that the lower the exposure, the less disruption there has been to the virus. The higher the exposure, the higher the number, the more disruption there's been in there. So if we just scroll down and look for an example, we can see this one is quantity surveyors, has a exposure index score of 36. So not near the top by any stretch of the imagination, but it's probably in that middle third. It's getting towards amber, so it shows that there has been some impact of automation, of COVID within that particular occupation. And there's more information on this and how it's calculated in the Knowledgebase. But I'm not going to get into that in too much detail now because it's not the particular focus of today's session. But please do go and have a look at that. So we sorted our data on the job change. We can now see within this professional occupation grouping in the southeast, which occupations have got the biggest projected growth over the coming years. So what I'm going to do now is I want to keep that, because it's such a long list, I just want to keep the top 10. So what I'm going to do is just go through and tick the ones which I want to keep. I've counted about 10 there. And what I'm going to do is just move up to the top, and we can either hide these, but we don't want to hide them. We want to keep these, and then it will just get rid of all the other data, and we've just got then a shorter list. Now, there's a number of things we can do from this point here. We could then now select all of these occupations, and we could jump to an occupation overview. So we could go into more detail to look at that grouping of occupations, or we could jump to job post analytics and see what the current job market is looking like for those occupations which have got that high growth opportunity in the southeast. Other things we can do within this report is we can save this report to our home area. We've applied quite a few filters on here, so if we saved it, then it would mean that we didn't have to keep doing that when we go back into the report. And the other thing we can do is export. So we could export to Excel or CSV, and I know some people prefer to do that so that they can then manipulate the data in Excel themselves. So from there, there's a number of things we can do. We could also go in and add more columns. So for example, we could add in the educational level column. And then when this filters, we've dropped the educational filter in, educational level in at the end. And for those of you who've not come across this before, this basically gives you the average level of qualification held by that particular occupation. It comes from the labour force survey. So it's not saying you have to have that level of qualification, but it's of people surveyed from the government surveys in that occupation. This is the average level of education that they hold. So that's the occupation table, a great way to really customize and flex the data that you're looking for, all focused around occupations, but with the ability to add and remove those different columns, quickly move between 4-digit and 1-digit SOC codes, and so on. So I'm just going to back to the home screen. I'm just going to pause a second because I think there's a question come through. Okay, so yeah, so one of the question that's just come through is that this looks different from the version that you're using in your college, and that's I know that college well, and that's because this is the full analyst product, which means that you guys have not got access to this part of the tool. You have FE Analyst, which is a cut down, streamlined version, really suitable for curriculum planning, but you've not got access to this part of the tool. We can certainly talk about that and look at getting you access to that. So moving on, that was occupations, and what we're going to do now is look at industries. And within industries, I'm not really going to talk through the industry table because it works in exactly the same way as what the occupation table just did. So if we looked at this section of industries, lots of the reports are really exactly the same as occupations. They're just focusing on industries rather than occupations. So again, we can do highest ranked industries, lowest ranked industries. And if we selected the industry table, you can see that it just looks exactly the same as what it did in terms of occupations, but this time we've got wages and GVA and these other metrics that we can select. So I'm not going to talk through that in detail because it just runs in exactly the same way. You can limit by industry, and then you can select the different columns that you wish to look at. So this time what I'm going to do within this industry section, you'll remember that I mentioned a report called Staffing Patterns when I showed you the PowerPoint slides, and this is the one that we're just going to finish off and have a look at. So I'm going to click into Staffing Patterns. And remember, if we remember what this report is looking at, we're going to select an industry, and then we're going to look at all the occupations which are linked to that industry. So this is a really good way of seeing the breadth of occupation that actually is employed by those industries. So what I'm going to do is just show you a different way to search this. So if you knew the industry you wanted to look at, you could just type that and it would appear. Again, you could select browse and select from the drop-down list of all the SIC codes in this case, or we could look at groups. So in groups, there's these predefined list of groups. You can also create your own groups based on industries that you're interested in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick this digital cluster group and select. And that has now given me lots of these industries relating to the digital industry. So it's lots of those kind of small micro level industries, 4-digit industries clumped together to make one bigger digital industry. So we're going to run that report. And what you'll see now is we're going to have, as the report settles, we've got the industries that we selected. Again, we can change the region, the time frame. We can change whether we want to look at 4-digit or 1-digit or all levels and apply filters. But here what we've got then is a list of all the occupations, occupation code, 4-digit occupation code level, which are associated or linked to this industry, these industries. So we can see, probably no surprise, that the biggest occupational group employed in the digital sector is programmers and software developers. And there's 36,000 jobs in 2020 employed in that industry. And again, we've got, we can't customize the fields on this one like we could in the table, but we've got a good range of information, different data columns about jobs and growth, hourly wages, and education level. So lots of these in the top look are what you'd expect with IT specialist managers and so on, because we're looking at digital industries. But you don't have to scroll down very far, and we've got sales accounts and business development managers. We can scroll further down and we've got things like accountants and marketing professionals. So this is a really good way to get a rounded look about the jobs that's employed in an industry. And you know, very often when we're looking at industries, we think about those kind of technical occupations. So like those computing occupations up at the top. But actually, when you look at the support services, so we can see, for example, sales and retail assistants, office managers, and personal assistants, when you look at all of those things together, it gives you a really different angle to think about that industry, particularly when you're thinking about things like curriculum planning, curriculum development. So that's the staffing pattern tool. It's a really useful report to run. And again, from there, you could filter on, for example, the job change. I think we're already filtered on that one. Actually, I'll just click it again. And then again, so we're now looking at those top growth occupations within this particular digital industry. And again, we could just select the top 2 or 3 or 4, and we could then jump to a different report. So it's a way of really drilling into the data that you want to find. We found those top growth jobs. We can now jump across to the occupation overview or occupation table. And if we jumped into the occupation table where we've just been, we could then start to add in those other columns and surface more data. So that's as much as I was going to show today. As I said, it was a quick session. We thought it was useful to give you a good introduction to the industry and occupation table. Other sessions that will be coming up is an introduction to input-output, an introduction to Strength Finder, and they'll just be a nice way to get you familiarised with some of the different types of report within the Analyst suite. So I can't see any other questions come through. I'll just pause for a moment or two if there are any other questions. But if not, the details will be on my email address and Ben's email address. Hopefully most of you have those anyway. But if not, they're on the PowerPoint slides. They'll be shared with the recording after the session. If you have any questions and need any support, then please just reach out. We'd be happy to do that. So no more questions come through. So thanks ever so much for attending today. Look forward to seeing you all soon.